Goeiemorgen, good morning, hujambo, bonjour, salam alaikum. Today I will show you how to make this bag for a writing tablet. Of course, the pattern is fully adjustable and you can make it any size you want, but with the stitch counts and row counts I am using, it ends up comfortably fitting a writing tablet of approximately 19 centimeters by 29 centimeters. It fits snugly, but that is what I was aiming for. You can leave it plain or decorate it in any manner you want. I'm sewing on a random bunch of flowers. To make this bag, I will be using cotton on from Ali. This is a 250 gram skein of yarn in a pure cotton double knit. I'm using color 504 Paradise. I'm sure you can do this with any DK weight yarn. The reason I'm choosing cotton is, firstly, cotton doesn't stretch as much and it is very strong, so a bag that you want to protect something in, this is ideal. Also because I'm using a very straightforward plain stitch, the stitch definition on cotton is better and so it looks more interesting in a cotton yarn. And then the reason for using a variegated yarn is also to add some interest to an otherwise plain straightforward stitch. You will also need a 4mm crochet hook, something to cut with. If you want it to be a specific size, a tape measure would be nice, as well as a yarn needle. If you are newer at crochet, it might also be useful to use some stitch markers and a button. I'm using rather large buttons, and the buttonhole I make match them, so that would be very close to 2 centimeters, which makes it 3/4 of an inch. To sew on the button, you'll also need some regular sewing thread and any regular sewing needle. You might also need some decorations. I have crocheted little flowers to decorate it with, but that is completely optional. Please note that when I crochet, I use UK terminology, but when I remember, I will mention the US equivalent and of course Afrikaans. To make this writing tablet bag, you will need to be able to do the following things: a chainless foundation double crochet. If you want to, you can also chain and do one row of double crochet after that. That is optional. I'm using a chainless foundation double crochet, a standing double crochet. Please remember these are all UK terms. A regular double crochet 2 together. As you can hear, it's all the double crochet versions. A chain stitch, a slip stitch. We will also be using the chain stitch and slip stitch to make a Picot Stitch, and we will be working into row ends. That's all the skills you need. If you struggle with any of those, I have a separate YouTube video that will help you for each of these. Just check out the description box below. To make this bag, we will crochet a rectangle, then fasten off and put that aside. Then crochet another rectangle of the same size and continue working up into a triangle to make the flap for closing. Crochet the 2 rectangle parts together and sew on the button. Voila, that's it. We will be using a chainless foundation, and the chainless foundation also kind of includes row 1. So the foundation row and row 1 is happening at the same time. I start with a slip knot. You can start in any way that you prefer. For the first stitch of the chainless double crochet foundation row, we will make 3 chains. There's a loop on the hook that we started with, yarn over, pull through, that is 1 chain made. Yarn over, pull through, 2 chains. Yarn over, pull through, 3 chains made. Now the first stitch of the chainless foundation double crochet is slightly different than the other stitches. For the first stitch, we go underneath 2 loops. And yes, I use my nails to get it. Yarn over and pull through these 2 loops. There are now 2 loops on the hook. Do not make it too tight. Yarn over and pull through the 1 loop only. Yarn over and pull through both loops on the hook. For the second stitch and all the other stitches, we will go underneath those 2 loops. You can turn the work so that you can more clearly see. There's the loop that was remaining on the hook and the 2 loops. Pull through and you have 2 loops on the hook. Yarn over and pull through 1 only. Yarn over and pull through both loops. One more time. Turn the work so you can clearly see those 2 loops and hook underneath those 2 loops, like so. Yarn over and draw up a loop through those 2 loops only, leaving 2 loops on the hook. Yarn over and pull through 1 only. Yarn over and pull through both loops on the hook. So 1, 2, 3, 4 chainless foundation double crochets. Continue in the same manner until you have 52. Make sure not to make your stitches too tightly, otherwise it's tighter than the rest of the work and pulls in towards the bottom. And I'll see you when I have a total of 52 of those. I'm over at the end of row 1. I have my 52 chainless foundation double crochets made. To count them, you can either count them from the bottom, in which case make sure that this first one right close up to the slip knot where we started counts as the first stitch, and you can count them from there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. Or you can count them from the top, and then also remember that this chainy bit was the first stitch. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or you can turn them sideways and count the bumps on the side. There's where we started. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. At the end of the row, it does look like it tapers into a point, but that will sort itself out. Don't worry. End of row 1. For row 2 and every other row of the main part of the bag, for the first stitch, make sure that the loop on hook is slightly loose. Do not make any turning chains. For the first stitch of every row, we will make a standing double crochet. To do that, insert the hook underneath both loops of the very first stitch. Yarn over and draw up a loop. You have 2 loops on the hook. Yarn over and pull through both, and that stitch will be the first of your stitch of your next row. If you want to, you can place a stitch marker in there to mark the place, and then for every other stitch in the row, make 1 UK double crochet. Insert the hook under both loops, yarn over, draw up a loop, 2 loops on the hook, yarn over and pull through both. I'm going to remove that since I do not need a stitch marker. Do this for every stitch in this row. Insert hook under both loops, yarn over, draw up a loop, yarn over, pull through both. At the end of row 2, simply turn your work, and to start row 3, make another standing double crochet just as we did this one, and then 1 double crochet into every stitch all through the row so that you keep your stitch count of 52. If you want to have the same measurements as I do, and you will continue this all the way from row 2 to row 40. I'm now almost at the end of row 40, and currently this panel measures between 29 and 30 centimeters by just over 18 centimeters. The little bit of stretch that cotton gives will make this enough. And then lastly, to fasten off at the end of row 40, let me do the last 2 double crochet. There's the second last one, and then the last one is in the standing DC from the previous row. Okay, green on green is not good. I should change back to the other. And then chain 2 more. Leave a piece of yarn long enough to be comfortable for you to work it in at the end. Cut, pull out the, and there it is. Now we will start the other panel. In the beginning, the other panel will look exactly like this. We'll only add a row or 2 more and then work the flap for closing it. Then you start again with a foundation row and row 1. Make 52 chainless foundation double crochets. After making the 52 chainless foundation double crochets, for the second panel you do exactly the same as the first panel, namely start every row with a standing double crochet and put 1 double crochet into every double crochet of the row, keeping the stitch count of 52, and keep on doing that again for 40 rows, and I'll see you when your second panel is the same height as the first panel. I'm over at the end of row 40, and the panel that we're working on right now should now be the same size as the first panel that you've made. So let's check. Then they are the same size. So what I'm going to do now is work 4 more rows of 1 double crochet into every row, just like the rest of the pattern, just to give it some height, and then we will start with a decrease for the flap. So put the first panel aside, continue with the second panel, exactly the same as we've been working so far, row 41 to row 44 if you want the same size as I do. Keep the chain loose, start with a standing double crochet and continue to work 1 double crochet into every stitch across for 4 more rows, and I will meet you at the end of row 44. I am at the last stitch of row 44, working the last double crochet, and that is 44 rows complete. For the next 22 rows, that will be 45 through 66, we will work double crochet rows but decreasing it to make it come to a point which will form the flap for the closure of the bag. So at the end of row 44 and every other row, turn and now work 2 double crochet together. We will work the first 2 stitches of every row as well as the last 2 stitches of every row together, making a decrease of 2 stitches per row until we have only 8 stitches left, and then I'll show you what comes next. To make a double crochet 2 together, remember we're at the start of the row, so make sure the loop on the hook is rather loose. Insert the hook, draw up a loop, do not complete the stitch, insert the hook into the next stitch underneath both loops as usual, and to draw up another loop. You now have 3 loops on the hook, yarn over and pull through all 3 of them. Then continue to work 1 double crochet into every stitch until there are only 2 stitches remaining. When you've completed this 3rd stitch from last, I'll join you again. I'm at the end of row 45, almost the end. There is the last double crochet, and now there are 2 stitches remaining. 1, 2. These 2, again, we will do a double crochet 2 together, insert the hook under both loops of the next stitch, yarn over, draw up a loop. There are 2 loops on the hook, do not complete the stitch. Insert the hook under the next 2 loops which will be the last stitch of the row, yarn over and draw up a loop. You have 3 loops on the hook, yarn over and pull through all 3. Now the stitch count has changed from 52 to 50 since we have decreased 1 stitch on every side, and this is what we will continue to do for another 21 rows. So for row 46, turn the work, make sure the first the loop on the hook is rather loose since we're starting with a standing double crochet. Insert the hook, making a double crochet 2 together, yarn over, draw up a loop. There are 2 loops on the hook, do not complete the stitch, insert into the next stitch, yarn over, draw up a loop, 3 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through all 3, then continue to make 1 double crochet per stitch again for the rest of the row until there are only 2 stitches remaining. This will be the last double crochet that you make, and as normal, and then over these 2 stitches it will be double crochet 2 together again, turn and repeat that until you have 8 stitches left only, and I'll meet you then. I'm at the end of row 66. That gives us 40 rows of 52 double crochets each, which makes this panel, or that part, the same as the other panel, also 40 rows of 52 double crochets. Then only for this panel we did an extra 4 rows of 52 double crochets per row, just to give it some extra height. And then we started from row 45 onwards to do a decrease of 1 double crochet on either side. So the beginning and ending of every row has a double crochet 2 together, and the number of stitches gradually decreased. By the time we got to the end of row 66, there are only 8 stitches left. Okay, so now it's time to go on to row 67. For row 67, we still start with a standing double crochet, and we still do double crochet 2 together. So that is 1, 2 stitches only halfway completed, complete them together, 1 double crochet, second double crochet, and now we need to make a little gap for the buttonhole. So the next 2 stitches we chain 2, skip those 2 stitches, make another double crochet. That will be the 3rd stitch from the end, and after the double crochet then 2 double crochet together, 1, 2 double crochet together. So row 67 is a decrease, then 1 double crochet, then chain 2, skipping the 2 stitches below, 1 double crochet and another decrease. That is the end of row 67. For row 68, turn, start with a standing double crochet, but also double crochet 2 together. So 1, 2 together, and then in the chain, around the chain space, we make 2 double crochet, 1, 2, and the last stitch will be double crochet 2 together again, 1, I didn't say 2, and there we are finished, finishing them all, both together, leaving us now with a stitch count of 4. Row 69, we will work 1 double crochet into each stitch, no decreases for all 4 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Now to fasten off, chain 2, cut the yarn, pull out. I left a rather long piece of yarn to work in the ends, which I will do in a moment. For the border, we will work a border around this panel on 3 sides, down the 2 sides and the bottom. Then fasten off and put it aside. Then we will work a border around the same sides of this one, and a border with a picot stitch around the fastening flap, whatever you call that thing, the one that closes. Okay, so first let's start with the border. A very simple double crochet edging around to make it easier to sew the 2 panels together later. Normally, to have right side facing, you have your beginning yarn tail to the left. Because we started with a chainless foundation, the starting yarn tail will be to the right when you have your right side facing. It really doesn't matter much for this because the pattern is basically the same on both sides, but just to be, sticking to proper procedure, we'll do right side facing. Attach the yarn to your hook. If it is right side facing, then we will start in the top left corner. We will not work into these, but we will attach the yarn into the top of the last stitch for this. So I have the yarn attached to my hook, and now to attach it to the crochet, we will use a regular slip stitch. There we have it, attached. Now we will make 1 double crochet into every border end. So the first one we will do in the side of this stitch. And here you can follow. So there is 1 row and there is the next row. The easiest is to go in this little gap between the rows and make 1 double crochet there. Again, in the gap between the 2 rows, make 1 double crochet. Continue doing this until you reach the end of this side, and I'll meet you there. I'm at the end of the first side. There's where we started, and then I worked 1 double crochet into each row end. This will be the last row end, but it also is the bottom corner, which will make us go from working into the side to working into the bottom part. So for this one, we're going to work 4 double crochets into the same place. 1 kind of for the side, 2 to get around the corner, and the last one will bring us to the bottom, like so. Then we continue to work 1 double crochet into the bottom of each stitch from the chainless foundation row, all the way across. When you get to this side, again 4 double crochet into the corner and 1 double crochet at the end of every row. After doing 1 stitch in each row up this side, remember to finish the last stitch inside the top of the row, just like we started the first stitch in the top of that, so the 2 sides so the two sides are equal. We've already worked this, started there, continue working all the way down there, up there, and when I'm finished there, I'll meet you again. When you're working down the bottom of the chainless foundation stitches, make sure you can turn your work to more easily see it, but make sure to only work under the 2 loops and to not include this 3rd loop. If you look at the stitches, there's this big inviting hole over there that makes you want to go in there. Don't. Look for the smaller space to work every stitch. So not in there, but in there. Again, not in there, but in there, so it only goes underneath the 2 loops down the bottom. Finished working this side, down the bottom, round the corner and up the other side. Time to make the last stitch in here. Then to fasten off, chain 2, cut, pull out the hook and pull tight. Let's move on to the other panel. It is right side facing. So for this one, we are going to start in here, in the bottom right corner, when the panel is lying with right side facing. Okay, leave some place for the yarn end to work in, attach to the hook. There it is, right side facing. We take the bottom right hand corner, not in there where the knot is, but right here where the first 2 rows. There. Attach the yarn with a slip stitch and then make a double crochet in the same place, and again we will work 1 double crochet between the rows all the way up this side. This side is slightly longer, it's not only 40 rows, it's 44 rows, and just before we start, when we reach the first decrease, we'll stop and I will meet you there. I have reached the row end of row 44, so we started there and worked 1 double crochet into each row end. This is the end of row 44. Now we are going to work the border around the closure flap, but for this we're going to decorate it a little bit with a Picot Stitch. So from row 5 onwards, from row 45 onwards, we are going to work 1 double crochet in the row end as usual, then 3 chain stitches, then we're going to go back down to that double crochet as well as the sidebar next to it, and make a slip stitch through all of those and the chain to form a Picot Stitch. Then work 3 double crochets, 1 in each row end. So for the next, was that a row end? Let me see. Come out, go back, no, go back properly. There you are. So that is that row, and then for this row, yes it was. Okay, 1 2, 3. Then make a picot stitch again. So to make the picot, 1, 2, 3 chains, go down to that double crochet at the base of the 3 chains, through the top loop of the double crochet and through this left leg. Let's do that again. There's the 3 chains made. Then through this front loop of the same double crochet that the chain 3 is made from, and the left leg of the double crochet, we will make a slip stitch for a very prominent and secure what's the word? Picot stitch. Now again, for the next 3 row ends, 1 double crochet in each. 1, 2, and 3, and then on the 3rd double crochet, the picot stitch. 3 chains through the front loop and the left leg, make a slip stitch. Continue doing that, and if you have 69 rows in this total, and you do a picot stitch in every 3rd double crochet, then you will have 1 picot stitch in this corner, 1 in this corner. Then continue doing the same thing down the other side of the flap. Your last picot stitch will be in row 45 again. Continue making 1 double crochet per row end down this side of the panel, and 1 double crochet per stitch of the chainless foundation double crochet, with 4 double crochet in each corner. After making the 4 double crochet of this corner, join with a slip stitch and fasten off, and that will be the end of the border around the other panel. I'll be doing that and see you in a bit. I'm back at the end of the border. To fasten off, chain 2, leave a yarn end so that you can comfortably work it in, cut, pull, and pull tight. I will work in these yarn ends. I've already worked in the yarn ends on the other panel, but I did not cut them off yet because it is the only way I can see which one is the wrong side and the right side. So I will cut them off in the last possible moment, remembering that where the yarn ends are is the wrong side of the work. I'll work in those yarn ends and see you in a bit. Now normally one joins the different parts of a project before you do the finishing touches. But for me, it is easier to first do any decorations that I want to be on the back before I sew the panels together. Because after the panels are sewn together, it will be much harder to work inside there. And so therefore, I'm going to reverse the order for myself. You can do it in whichever order you prefer for this project. Also, you do not need to decorate it in any way, but if you want to, you could add just a few interesting buttons. Buttons can work great as a decoration. All of it's not in. There it is. Buttons can be a great way to decorate something. You could leave it plain. You could do some surface embroidery. It really is up to you how you want to decorate it. I have made some random crochet flowers, which I will find a way to sew them together. I'm not quite sure what I'll do yet. Maybe, I don't know, something like that. A few here, a few there, maybe all over, I don't know. But I will sew my flower decorations onto the bag now, because it will be much easier to work right through. If I decide that this flower needs to go there, it will be much easier to sew right through the whole panel than having to do it after the panels have been joined. So if you want to do some decoration, you can decorate the panel now, and I'll see you after that's done. Oh, one more thing, the button for closure I will sew on at the end when I can measure exactly where it needs to be placed. It is now time to join the panels. I've done the decorations that I wanted to do, and so it is time to find row 40. This will just make it easier to know where the panels need to start and join. Because we've already worked the border around, I think it's easier to find row 40 by remembering that the picot was in row 45, and then work backwards and place a stitch marker in there for both sides. There I have my 2 stitch markers placed in row 40, one on either side. So now we take the decorated panel, the bigger panel, have it wrong side facing. We also find the wrong side of the other panel so that the wrong sides are together, like so. Make sure that the bottom where you work the border around, make sure it is also against the other bottom. And then align row 40 of the smaller panel, that is the part where you did not work a border around. Line it up with the stitch marker so the 2 row 40s are together, and then these should line up all the way down the side. Because we've worked a double crochet into the edge rows, it will make it much easier to crochet the 2 panels together than if we had to go through the row ends of both panels. Attach the yarn to the hook. I use a slip knot. Attach the yarn to this first stitch on the top left hand side if you have the right side facing you of the smaller panel, because that will be the stitch on top of row 40. Attach the yarn, then work a double crochet going through both loops of this panel as well as both loops through the corresponding double crochet of the other panel. So for both of them, this will now be the loops of the border around at the position of row 40. So there are the starting yarn on the hook as well as 4 loops from the 2 panels. Pull the yarn through all of those to draw up a loop and finish the double crochet. To the next stitch, underleave both loops of the first panel, both loops of the second panel, yarn over, draw up a loop, yarn over, pull through both. Next stitch, both loops and both loops, draw up a loop, complete the stitch. I'm going to make 1 or 2 more to make sure these panels are securely worked together. And now that these are secured together, I can now snip off all the yarn ends I've worked in before. And before continuing to crochet, I will work in this yarn end now that it's easier to maneuver around the backside. And after that, work 1 double crochet through both loops of the 2 corresponding stitches of both panels, crocheting them together. When you get to the corner, because you already have multiple stitches, you can still just work every stitch with its corresponding one on the other side. Work it all together until you get to the end of the one panel, which will also correspond to the stitch marker of the second panel. And then when we get there, we will fasten off, and that will join the 2 panels securely together. And I'll see you at the end of that.